it's going on. So welcome everybody to today's webinar on the urban logistics through public-private partnership as part of the series of 5 webinars that we are organizing on the Coalition of the Willing on Sustainable Mobility. We are here together with our partners from Polis, Alice, ULADS, Civitas, and LEAD. Some housekeeping rules before we start with the presentation. Please switch off your microphones during the presentation. You can put your camera on if the connection is stable. My colleague Ariana will give you the floor during the Q&A presentation. Raise your hand if you want to intervene or write your questions in the chat box, please. And also, as a reminder, we are recording this webinar. So today's agenda.
Melin, you muted yourself.
Sorry. I will give a brief introduction on the Covenant of Mayors and the role of transport. Then the colleagues from Alice and Polis will set the scene, providing the guidance on how to achieve zero emissions on urban logistics by 2030. It will be followed by 3 presentations from 3 different projects from cities, Antwerp, Bremen, and Madrid, followed by the Q&A session by my colleague Ariana. So, as you know, the Covenant of Mayors is the world's largest movement for local climate and energy actions. In Europe, we have already over 11,000 signatories that are joining forces to secure a better future for their citizens. Our vision is that by 2050, we will all be living in a decarbonized and resilient cities with access to affordable, secure, and sustainable energy. As part of the Covenant of Mayors Europe movement, mayors commit to continue to first, reduce greenhouse gas emissions on their territory. Second, increase resilience and prepare for adverse impacts of the climate change with climate adaptation strategies. And thirdly, to tackle energy poverty as one of the key actions to ensure a just transition. So these are some figures of our Covenant community. As you can see, we have more than 11,000 signatories over 55 countries. And this is the new political commitment, which was launched in April 2021, where cities are committing to becoming climate neutral by 2050 or well before, by setting their mid-long-term targets consistent with the EU objectives and at least as ambitious as their national targets. So this is the framework under which we are currently working in the Covenant. And also one of our key priorities for this year is to support the EU's Repower EU plan, which was adopted by the Commission on the 18th of May, and the set of legislative proposals to become independent from fossil fuel imports and to boost local energy production. And our Covenant of Mayor Board representatives from the list of mayors and deputy mayors presented some key suggestions to the EU decision makers. As part of it, we launched in May 2022 the campaign on Cities Energy Saving Sprint, encouraging cities to take both short and mid-term actions to save energy to alleviate energy poverty in their communities. So here is a snapshot of the campaign on the Energy Saving Sprint, which is a joint initiative from the European Commission, Covenant of Mayors Europe, and the Committee of the Regions to encourage cities to take measures that will immediately reduce their energy consumption. You will see that there is a link where you can have access to the toolkit of measures in different fields, such as public lighting, reducing our bills in the buildings. So this was also reflected in the Safe Guides for a safe winter plan adopted by the Commission in July this year, with the fact sheets on the cities where they recognize the role of this campaign as one of the key measures for cities to reduce our consumption ahead of this winter. So here is as well what we do in our capacity building activities, such as peer learning visits, funding, financing opportunities, spotlights through different case studies, basically a set of materials that we promote. And let's move on the role of transport in the Covenant of Mayors framework. Actually, transport is well integrated in the Covenant through the 3 pillars that I commented earlier. First of all, in mitigation, transport is one of the 4 key mitigation sectors for our signatories. In the 2-year report of the baseline emission inventory, they have to collect data from 3/4 of the sectors, including transport. Then on adaptation, we also have signatories to select at least one of the 13 sectors per climate hazard identified to report on the risk and vulnerability assessment. And also on energy poverty, which was a newly integrated pillar, we also have transport linked via the mobility indicators, including in the slide, such as access to services within 1 hour of walking, cycling, public transport, or population living more than 1 kilometer away from public transport, etc., etc. On the right side, you can also see that from the study published by GRC in 2019, actually, from the percentage of greenhouse gas emissions reported by the cities, 26 is coming from transport. And among all the actions in the covenant, almost 15 is related to transport. That's why we decided to launch this coalition on sustainable mobility with the series of webinars that we are doing today. Here is a snapshot of the activity on capacity building as part of the coalition of the willing, because we wanted to include transport as part of the climate neutrality efforts, and we have decided to launch this coalition. The Covenant of Mayor Office strengthened the liaisons with stakeholders holding expertise in different topics such as mobility, buildings, energy communities. And in this case, in transport, we have here on the left our partners for the webinars on transport. And today is taking place the second one, because the first one already took place in June 2022 on public transport. And as I said, today we are having our second session, which will be followed by 3 more. Just stay tuned in the Covenant website and we will share with you the upcoming webinars. Thank you so much. I will give the floor now to my colleagues from Polis and Alice. Thank you.
Okay, and you're going to run the presentation? Okay, right.
If you want, Yanjin, you can also take control of the slides with the button on top so that you can move them yourself if you want.
Okay. But I need to find the right one. Sorry. Sorry, I need to find the right slides. So while I'm trying to find it, my name is Yan Li. I work for Alice. So maybe you could add our Alice one in your collaborations. It's happy to be invited here. Alice is a logistic driving organizations. So can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. And in right mode? Okay, good. So Alice is stand for Alliance for Logistic Innovations through collaborations in Europe. So we are industry led partnership technology platforms. We have about 170 members, I believe now. We grow very fast, including all type of logistic stakeholders in our network. We have one thematic group dedicated to urban logistics. And the importance is urban logistics is not only the emissions we see from the previous presentations, but also the increasing demanding. I believe everybody ordered a lot from internet, and that delivers to your home, and that give a lot of pressures on the urban logistics sector itself. By taking that, Alice has close collaborations with Polis. So we published last year in December a guide for advancing tower zero emission urban logistics by 2030. And that is give a guidelines how we believe the city and the regions and the companies should work together to achieve our vision. And that including 5 areas, and we will go in detail. And you can download the guide from our website, I believe. we can share that presentations, and later I can put in the chat box as well. And so this guide is the document, and it's come from as a result of strategic dialogue between Alice and the police. Alice is representing the logistic companies, and the police representing the sustainable transport thinking cities. So we discussed a lot, and then we decided to put all our ideas into one document. So this is where the documents come from. So we all know the challenges, and we have all the problems, and urban logistics played a very important role in urban logistics and in the transport in cities. It's not only is for the quality of life, but it's also play important roles in economies. We need to make sure shops get well delivered, and we all heard that during the COVID, shops often empties because of supply chain issues. And it's also very important is to address air pollutions, climate congestions, and then also is safety, transport safety is a lot of traffic accidents involved with logistic vehicles and so on. So it's played a very important part in overall urban mobility planning and operations. And we still believe in Alice. Is a lot more attention should be paid by all stakeholders, and also we hope that more projects can come to support cities and logistic sectors to work together. So let's go back to this guide. We call it the joint guide. Through the presentation, we will use the name, the joint guide. So that is really to set the challenges, to understand what are the key challenges. Actually, this document did not really look the increased demand. That actually something we should take care of. And then the current.
We lost your presentation.
Okay, sorry, I try again. I don't know why I didn't do anything. I promise. Now I go back this again. This is now in. I'm sorry about this.
No worries.
Okay. We're back.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we also in this document we look the current existing white papers, roadmaps from different organizations, and then we identified the areas of interventions needed, and that including the current solutions, what we learned, and the gaps and references, examples. And we also provide recommendations for different type of stakeholders, for cities, for companies, for government, for researchers, for civil societies, and even for citizens. And you will see how we talk to the citizens. Okay. So we identified 5 areas. It's very, very difficult. We spend a lot of time to discuss how we can label them, because all of them have very strong interconnections. But we still try to put some names under different topics. So we start with the governance and the regulations. And then a very important topic we believe we all work on is a clean and alternative fleet, logistic operation, and then the data. How to collect the data, share data, so how to use the data. And then one is relatively new from our members is the consumer engagement. Has not been so well studied, researched, and the benefit has not been fully exploited. Okay. So started from smart governance and regulation. So we definitely believe a sustainable urban logistic plan is a good tool to help the cities, but is to also help logistic companies. We hope that logistic companies can be part of the consultation process in developing such a plan. And we also believe that this kind of plan is not just for short term, and we need to think about for short term, medium term, long term, and give enough time for the companies to react. Recently, just before summer, we had a dialogue between public and private sector on low emission zones in cities, zero emission zones for cities. And one of big players actually specifically said to set up this zero emission zones for them, they need 2 years minimum to plan everything. Otherwise, they will just stop deliver into city centers, and that's the business and the citizens will suffer. So that's something, the dialogues between public and private for setting any policy frameworks is essential. We believe that the cities may have a better views to see who are your key players there, and then to find a way to engage them. And at the same time, the companies should be more active in the policy making, and to be more active. And we need local business and logistic sectors to work together to find a consensus rather than just to present their problems, but to give concrete recommendations to the policymakers. I pause here on Ivo if you want to have anything to add here.
No, I'll come in with a couple of comments at the end. Yeah.
Okay.
And I posted the link to the document in the chat also for all the participants.
Thank you. And for the clean and alternative fleet, we definitely believe that is a way forward to achieve zero emission urban logistics. We need clean vehicles. We need alternative vehicles. We need cargo bikes. You probably will heard from Yugat later about use of cargo bikes, also light vans, electric, or other clean vehicles. We don't want to limit it to electric vehicles only, because some of our members and still believe other technologies, this is controversial, we leave it there. So any zero emission vehicles is a way forward. And we need a new business model. We also need different ways of thinking. So for example, if we take a cargo bag as example, if we want to use cargo bags, we need to have micro or smaller terminals inside the city centers as traditional ways of warehouses outside the cities. That kind of model will not work. So we need consolidation centers inside the cities. We also believe that deployment of clean vehicles need support of infrastructures, and that could also be part of bigger plans of energy transitions to renewable energies, be part of play a role in energy storage and balancing of the grid and so on. And we don't overlook the new technologies, autonomous vehicles, drones for deliveries, probably not for passengers yet, but for freight transport, it may come faster than we expected. For certain countries, particularly those with inland waterways, don't forget to use them and to use different type of modes for the urban logistic. Okay. Logistic operation. That is a very good topic. We actually believe that it's a consolidated strategies will work. Will reduce emissions significantly. I believe that later we heard one example in Antwerp that's very concrete, how to consolidate urban freight and then to reduce the flow and to increase efficiencies. And for logistic operators is not increase the cost, but to reduce their carbon footprint. We also hope that companies and the cities can work together to find a best ways to flexibly use the times, the space, how we can to not disrupt the current this how the business works inside the cities, but also to not overlook the interests of logistic companies and the business as well. Also important for the logistic operations and workers' welfare and safety and skills are also important. If cities put too harsh labor requirement, that could result withdrawal of certain players, and they just stop delivering and they stop hiring, and that also at the end will become problems of everybody. It's very unfortunate. This sector is still one of few sectors provide job opportunities for less educated, low skill, also low paid workers. We try to increase the skills to make these sectors have more skilled labor opportunities, let's say, but that's need also public and private partnerships to work together. Data, we all heard that is a lot potential. It's huge benefit for everybody, but it's also a lot problems. We understand that cities probably do not have the capacities to host and to maintain a big data set. But at the same time, the companies are willing to share their data with the cities if this can support sustainable urban logistic plannings, to support policy makings. So we need to find good ways to balance how we can use the data from logistic sectors to support policy making, decision makings, and how we can use this data to make sure that any policies will support the logistic companies, and we can best to use the urban space and resources. And for example, now we have some research into flexible delivery zones and the use of the curbside, the urban space. Those all policies would need data support, and we can also use the data to evaluate impact of different policy measures. Okay, consumer engagement, that's a very good topic. And it's actually come from one of our members. It's called Proximus. If you live in Belgium, you know it's mobile operator. So when they deliver the latest iPhone, they give a choice to consumers. They can choose the least polluted delivery solutions. And they may wait for a few more days, but that makes sure the logistics for the new smartphone will be less polluted than the fastest or others, and the cost is the same. And it's a huge success. Surprise to everybody, because almost everybody choose that. Even for the new iPhone, they don't mind to wait for a few days if they realize that if they choose the zero emission logistics solutions and they can save the planet, they don't mind to wait. We also realize this is very, very little choice for consumer to choose to green delivery. You only have a normal deliveries or fastest delivery. So how can make consumers who realize their choice could have a big impact on overall carbon footprint of themselves, of the cities? By doing so, we believe that we can engage the citizens, and then we can mobilize these resources and to reduce the emissions together for the urban delivery. Retailers and business should be positive to contribute to the city climate actions. And from what we heard in our circles, all of them are willing to do it. And we just need to have more awareness campaigns, and we need to have more research projects into how is the best way to do it. And we need to influence cities, we need to influence big business to do the same. Okay, I think that was a quick overview. For implementing this guide to deliver that, we organize a webinar series. You can see the topics are a little bit diverse, let's say. The first one was to combine with passenger and freight transport, because that has not been mentioned when we are doing the guides. But then afterwards, this become a very important topics. We come by the cities and said, can we exploit the possibilities? And then the collaborative urban logistics, that is the real examples from Antwerp you will heard, and this has not been piloted. We actually see the results. And zero emission zones, of course, is very important, particularly the dialogues between public and private. I should remove the to be confirmed, is actually we already done it. And we also try to discover how we can use inland waterway transport for urban logistics, and then best use urban space and functions of a city center. And then the curbside management and the data-related logistic management. We are now collecting new input because this sector is very fast growing. As one side is demanding from the customers, but also another side is the pressures from the city climate actions, because this sector growing so fast and they become a bigger polluter. So we gather all new technologies, new solutions, new business models, and through these years, and we will put together as a note for end of this year, and this will be make this guide is always alive. Okay, I pause here. Ivo?
Yeah, thanks, Yan-Ying. I'll be very brief because you did a great job presenting the guide. I think the story that Yan-Ying presented shows the complexity of urban logistics when we talk about trying to get that organized from the side of cities. Because we are talking on the one hand we are talking about two sides of integration. One aspect is integration within an urban territory, and urban city governments who try to manage different policies at the same time within that territory. And then secondly, urban logistics as the last mile of a global mobility chain, a global logistics chain. And it's these two processes that we're trying to reconcile in the guide also, and also in our dialogue between our two organizations. And there are some other tools that I will share in the chat that can help you as a covenant of mayor involved party, which we assume is mainly looking at local planning through the CCAP, through the climate action plan, or for those that are also working under the mission, under climate contracting. And so our starting point also within mobility, on the side of mobility, is the SUMP. You might know of the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. It's the sister tool of the CCAP. So it's a planning principle, a planning process that has been endorsed by the European Commission. And there is a guide on the specificity of urban logistics planning. I share that in the link. We call that SULUPS. Sorry for the awful acronyms. But so there is a guide if you would be looking into your CCAP and you are working on a mobility plan. There is a guidance document to detail the work you can do on logistics planning. To dig a bit deeper, there's a global movement towards zero emission logistics, focusing on zero emission zones. And for that, Polis has worked with C40 and TDA on a guide on zero emission zones, and you'll hear also further examples later in the discussions. But this is a practical guide on how to start working on really carbon neutral logistics in specific specific urban environments. And on the basis of that guide, we have worked also with different stakeholders, amongst whom also Sandra, who's here in the panel, Sandra Rothbard, as an expert. We have worked on some concrete guidance material and support material to develop your activities on zero emission logistics planning. And you find the link there, the SURF project funded by the Environment Defense Funds Fund. So that can also help you through a longer e-course and best practice examples to get you going on logistics planning. So I think if we bring all that guidance together, the guide that Janine presented, and then the EU endorsed SOAP guidance, and then the work that has been done on zero emission zones, I think that gives a pretty good framework for Covenant of Mayors active cities to get going on the topic. So I leave it at this, and I'll pass on the floor back to the Covenant of Mayors team to manage questions and the next presentations.
Thanks a lot, Ivo. We will make sure to include all the links and documentation that you provided into the summary that we will develop at the end of the series of webinars. Is there any questions for, I know that Tianjin can only stay for another 15 minutes, so I would encourage anyone that has a question for her to either write them in the chat or raise their hand now. If not, I have a question for Yanjin, and I know it's a hard one. But you mentioned the importance of data and the role that data can play in improving planning and making more conscious planning choices for city authorities. How would you say that is the best way for cities to approach logistic companies to request that data?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I don't have answer actually. I think it's very different. It depends the size of cities, the capacities, and the type of logistic operators is small or big. And so what is the best way to go forward from what we learned from our networks is to do joint living labs and to do small pilot and trial together. We actually now are thinking to advocate European Commissions or other funding providers to provide specific funds for cities and logistic companies at the local levels to work together to find the best way to work. So I can only tell you what the approach should be, but I don't have the answer.
Yeah, I said it's a very hard one, but I think it's something important to keep in mind. Thanks a lot, Yanjin. I see there is another question in the chat. They are asking what are some of the demand side management measures that are plausible in urban logistics. I'm not sure I understand the question completely. Maybe Subina, you would like to unmute yourself and elaborate on it?
Is that to reduce demand?
Hi, yeah. So earlier you talked about how urban logistics is a growing sector because there is an external pressure from increased demand. So how is there any way that demand can be managed at all, or is that something we simply can't do?
Yeah, maybe I can. Yeah, just there are two trajectories. There is a movement towards local consuming local products. So that's I think that's an important factor. The other element is, and then you are also looking at integrated policies about food policies, etc., agriculture, etc. The other aspect is reduction of the number of inbound or outbound trips with consolidation. experiences. So consolidation means that you group the parcels or deliveries from different providers into one delivery journey. And that's that of course that doesn't really talks about the demand for movement, but it's the demand in trips at least. And there we have successful examples, and Janine can complement as well, I think. But the idea is that this is very much appreciated by the ones receiving deliveries. And so also smaller companies or shops are not happy with a large number of deliveries on a day. They also like that it's grouped. So this is a solution that can help to reduce movement in our streets, but also can help the end customer of the logistic products that are either projects that are moved.
Thank you, Ivo. Yang-Yin, would you like to add anything, or we can?
It's absolutely perfect. That's exactly what we talk about. We need to have a consumer engagement. We need to have awareness campaigns to make anybody aware of that. You do 2 clicks, that's how much emissions can come from, and that far from being sufficient at this moment, I believe. So we should do more citizen engagement and consumer engagement.
Thank you, Yang-Yin. Good. Then I think we can move on to our set of speakers. Thanks a lot, Ivo and Yang-Yin. Ivo, of course, you're welcome to stay with us for the rest of the webinar.
I'll be here, yes.
And so our next speaker is Alex. You have heard a bit about Antwerp already. Yang-Yin mentioned it. So Alex, I would encourage you to, we can see you on the screen. Would you like to share the slide yourself, or would you prefer that I do so?
I can share it if it's good for you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I have just a limited number of slides, just 3 slides. This one to start off with. I hope you can see.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks first for having me here and giving me the opportunity to present the CULT case that we have in Antwerp. CULT stands for Collaborative Urban Logistics and Transport. And the idea behind is that we should be able to let's say, organized consolidation, as Yang-Yin also mentioned, that consolidation is the way forward if we want to increase drop density, because drop density is key in city deliveries, is key for having more sustainable deliveries. If the distance between 2 successive stops is as small as possible, then we can create less, we can do the delivery with less transport, more sustainable, but also more efficient for the different companies. And that's why we took the initiative to approach, let's say, owners of the flow, the shippers, as we call them, and saying, okay, guys, if you can sit together, then you can consolidate goods. And we, as a neutral orchestrator, Revisor is a new orchestrator there, will help you to synchronize these flows, because synchronizing is very important. You should be sure that every morning the goods arrive at the same time, that you can create a consolidation by delivering in the city. And originally we started with just 7 companies. Now we have doubled almost. We are 13, and there are some other companies waiting now to come in. But maybe more than just the setup here is the framework that we have developed for that. Now, before we go further, I just want to mention, for those who knows these brands, you see, for instance, Proximus and Telenet. These are 2 of the biggest telecom companies in Belgium. They are competitors. The same holds for Krefeld and Frank van den Borre. These are 2 competitors. And although they realize that they have to deliver to the same shops, they couldn't care. They are looking really to combine and give, let's say, a mutual efficiency. That's doing more together. And that's why we call this project larger than life, because no single company of this has sufficient flows to realize what we can realize now. And this is exceptional. And this is the driver behind, because companies know by opening up for having other companies in the collaboration will improve their own situation cost-wise, but also will improve the sustainability of the solution and, very important, the livability of the city. Drop density is key to go to livability of the city. And we try to organize daily deliveries at the same moment, very reliable, same time every day. And that's in fact important, more important than doing quick commerce. It is important to have deliveries in a reliable way every day, approximately the same slots. Especially shop owners are very well prepared to that, because they know when the bus will pass and we can give our pickups with the bus or receive our deliveries from the bus. That's very important. And you can only realize this if you have consolidation effects. Now, maybe the most valuable thing that we realized all together is creating this framework. And we have a framework where, on one part, we engage the companies, and we let them sign a multilateral contract. In fact, there is only one contract ruling the entire cooperation, and it's a multilateral contract. I think it's very innovative with respect for logistics today, where the one-to-one contract is the only way forward, or was the only way forward. This is a multilateral contract. And so we are able to onboard new companies very quickly, because it's a standardized contract. These are standardized processes. So standardization is a very strong aspect and a very important aspect in the collaboration. Otherwise, we will not be able to onboard new members very rapidly, right? Scalability is the second one. Can we onboard rapidly to increase the gain sharing for every member who is already on board? And we are organizing a gain sharing in a very simple way. We have asked the logistics service providers to provide us with a table, a kind of stagger table. What is the drop cost for 1,000 parcels, and what is it for 1 million parcels? And all the steps between 1,000 and 1 million. And now, for instance, we are at 40,000, I think, and everybody gets the drop costs of 40,000. If there is a new member entering, then we all get a drop cost of 50,000. Very important, through this framework, we are able to engage several service providers. And as we are, as a neutral governor, making these companies working together in a neutral way, we can do exactly the same at the other side, at the side of the service providers, which is very important, because then you could start thinking on zoning and things like that. And the same framework also, and this is also very important, is able to involve the city authorities. And what is maybe the biggest message behind this framework? Well, in Antwerp, we started with the companies. We started putting together the companies and starting to develop the framework. But with this framework, even if a city would ask us, could you help us to organize the city distribution? We can. We can deploy that framework and then start to engage and onboard companies and service providers. We also received questions from other cities saying, okay, I have a lot of service providers and I would like to create some order in this. And that because profitability is really at stake for these guys. If you have too much and they are delivering too few deliveries, then you have a problem from livability of the service provider. So this framework also provides an opportunity to working together logistics service providers in a completely antitrust compliant way. So what is strong, and that I will close with that, we have provided this framework as a kind of real ecosystem within a city, and we can offer different ways to enter such a project. It can be started by the city authorities, or it can be started by companies, or it can be started through the entrance of the logistics service providers. And we can further develop and deploy this framework. And let's say the proof of the pudding for us was very recently that we were able to onboard 6 new members at once, and this has worked. And we are now operational since 15 March 2022. Maybe just a very last word on the gains. The first observations we made after 2 months of working is that we reduced carbon emissions with 90% compared to the situation where every shipper was using his traditional logistics provider to enter the city. So we had a 90% reduction of carbon, and a 25% reduction of kilometers covered through the consolidation. So these are strong results that could be even improved if we continue to create that consolidation effect and reduce or increase the drop density. That's the major message. So that's all I have to say. I hope it was clear, and feel free to ask any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Alex. Extremely interesting. I have already many questions, but I would wait for the participants. There is already a couple, I think, in the chat.
Yeah, I see them. The B2B, B2C is both flows are in now. We even work with parcels and pallets. And we are now envisaging the temperature control even on parcels and pallets. That's the next step. But indeed, it is B2B, B2C all together. And who manage the vehicles used for the service? It is a service provider, which is, in this case, it is bpost. We have tendered this out, and bpost was the first to be selected. But as said, it is very possible if we move to another city that another service provider will do the service, or even we can come to kind of zoning within the same city and things like that. So all options are open to work and to really collaborate also among service providers, which I think is a crucial element in creating the livability of the city.
And quite revolutionary, because they usually don't really like to do that. So thanks a lot. I think we can keep some questions for the discussion at the end. So I would move on to the next speaker. Yeah, Sabina, I will keep that question for later. Thanks. So the next speaker is Karsten. I actually work with him closely on the project ULADS. He is the project coordinator. So let me share the slide for you, Karsten.
Perfect. Yes. Could we start with slide 1, which I can't see myself right now as being shared?
Is charging.
Or it's charging, okay. So let me, nope, that was not the idea. Change back to the other camera. Is it still charging?
Yes, it's going to take maybe a couple of seconds.
Yeah, let me start with a couple of words. As Ariana said, we do cooperate in ULADS, and maybe Ariana, and as I didn't put any links in my presentation, maybe you could put the links in the chat box to the ULADS website and the leaflet maybe.
Yes.
I am using the ULADS template, but I won't be talking about ULADS except for one pilot or one trial that we do in Bremen, and which is, in our view, a nice example of a collaborative delivery model. And this is what I'm going to share with you today. So if we can move on to the next slide. So Bremen is and always and long has been a central hub for the logistics industry. And the picture that you can see in the bottom left is the freight village in Bremen, which is one of the biggest and was one of the first freight villages of its kind. As you can see, you see the inner city where it says Jakobikirchhof on the right-hand side, and the freight village is on the other side of the river, about 10 kilometers apart. So the idea originated, why don't we try and have zero emission last mile delivery in the inner city for certain goods that would qualify for that? And we started out, in contrast to many other projects going on, we started out saying, okay, we'll do this with general cargo, not CEP services, not the small courier express parcel services, but really larger shipments that were transported from from the GVC to the inner city, usually on 7.5-ton trucks operated by the project partners. Two of the logos you can see, which is BHS and Hellman, who were the first. So what they do is they leave in the morning and they supply a micro hub in the center of the city. From there, the last mile delivery to the customers, and this is strictly B2B at this point. It happens on heavy cargo bikes operated by project partners. The bikes are provided by Reitel, which is also a project who are also partners in ULATS, and the Bremer bike couriers who then do the delivery. Next slide, please, Ariana. So this is how it looks. We have a place in the inner city in the backyard of where there's a so-called environmental loading zone, as it was called, Umweltladeplatz. This was the site of the first micro hub. And you can see a few of the pictures to the right as to what happens. So the delivery, the 7.5-ton truck arrives in the morning, and then the micro hub is being stacked, and there's two different Reitel delivery bikes, one for pallets, much like Alex was saying, we're doing pallets and small packages. And then the bike couriers start their delivery tours throughout the city, where there's emission-free last mile delivery of goods and services. But then again, as I said, it's shipments. These are not letters. It's not the typical 2 books ordered from Amazon, but really typically general cargo, heavier and bulkier than would be the case with CEP. Next slide, please. So as the system went, once it was established, there was this first hub on public ground, which you can see in labeled number 1 in the inner city, close to the market area and the town hall. And then the second hub was started operation in July 21 last year. And that's well, the first one is on public ground and using a special permit. For the second hub, it was decided to rent long-term 3 spots on a parking lot, on a public parking lot, to put the micro hub there and take care of the surrounding areas, again using cargo bikes for the last mile delivery. And there's currently a third one, which I'll be talking about later on, and we're considering locations and sites, obviously, for further micro hubs if the critical mass to support them is there. Next slide, please. So we have a certain area, or there's one circle too much in this picture anyway. We have essentially we have the container, the micro hub in the container form, which fits 9 Euro pallets in terms of space. As I said, situated in the old town in the inner city to the left-hand side, labeled with the 1. And then there's the second one is again a little in the distance and in an area more lively. So after one night, this is what the hub looked like. It's sprayed all over with graffiti. So it's situated in a mixed zone. It's serving areas close to the east, but east of the inner city, as you can see. It started, as I said, in July 21, and within 2 months, it allowed us to double the volume of freight that was covered by this situation of containerized last mile logistics. Okay, next slide, please. This is an overview of what was actually achieved. As you can see, the number of shipments for up through December 21. You can see the jump in July 21 when the second hub was opened as a bit of a seasonal or monthly change from one month to the next, but the number of shipments has been fairly satisfactory. And you can see the amount of cargo that was that was moved in a month. And at the right where it says 2,629 shipments, at the right it should say, in terms of weight, this was close to 168 tons. My mistake. So what you can see is the average weight of a shipment is close to 64 kilograms. So that's a really, really different story from the CEP service, which typically limit the weight of boxes that they deliver to, I think, 32 kilograms is the limit there. So most of it is B2B, and it's typically heavier shipments, cargo, general cargo, not CEP. That was the case until the end of last year. So if we now move on to the next slide, you can see the third hub, which was launched in May this year. And as you can see in the top picture, in the top photo there, it's back to back with the hub number one, the first hub that was, or the original one. And we succeeded, this again being a public-private partnership, being funded by ULAT's money, but also it was originated and funded by the city of Bremen. So we succeeded adding a new private partner, and it's a different partner than the two other ones involved to date, in that it's a company that's supplying pharmacies and medical practices with typically smaller goods and packages that you can see in the bottom right picture, where there's a delivery van rather than a 7.5 ton truck. And as you can see, the parcels or packages are much, much smaller. And that too, so that's the third partner in the scheme. And what you can also see is how that has affected the amount of shipments, because previously, if we only check for this year, we typically had around anywhere from 100 to close to 200 packages or shipments in a month, and that kind of skyrocketed by almost 8 times as many packages, just counting the packages. At the same time, and shipments or packages per day as well, almost 8-fold. But at the same time, the average weight of a shipment was significantly reduced, obviously, because the smaller packages are much, much less heavy or much, much lighter to carry around. So that's been quite a bit of a change there in terms of adding new players and increasing that, or building up on scaling, trying to scale up that model. Next slide, which is going to be the final slide already. In terms of outlook and goals, our target, together with everyone involved in this consortium and in this trial, is to expand to include further logistics partners from general cargo, simply to build up more critical mass beyond the two that are currently involved. Another goal would be to combine freight forwarding goods, general cargo, and CEP package providers. You can see the DHL delivery van in the top right. Most likely it's not going to be DHL, who have 50% market share in Germany, but more likely a regional CEP provider that could be integrated, and there's talks already going on already including CEP into that system as well. If that happens, and if we have the volume to support it, obviously we're looking for additional micro-hubs in other locations. You can see at the bottom right, you can see this is the old freight train station, where there's a whole area that we're thinking about to establish one of those micro-hubs as well. But the challenge, and this brings me to the end already, the challenge remains also to achieve a long-term economic sustainability of the system. We have achieved a degree of environmental sustainability, which you can see in the number of tons of goods that would not be transported using CO2 producing delivery vehicles, but rather doing this on a local zero emissions basis. But the system so far has been only functional as long as there's support on the part of either ULATS as an EU project or city-funded money. And the same goes for a lot of these pilot projects, which came to an end pretty much the minute that public funding was no more available. So the key challenge for all the actors involved and stakeholders involved here would be to find a solution that makes it at least a break-even situation that has an environmental advantage, or ideally a proper business case for the people involved. Okay, with that I'm closing, and there's only contact details on the last slide. Open to questions and comments anytime. Thank you very much for I should have opened saying so. Thank you very much for inviting me to give you this short overview of what we do in Bremen as one example.
Thank you very much, Karsten. I think, are there any questions right away for Karsten? Feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat if any. Otherwise, you can keep them in your mind, and we will have still a bit of time for discussion after the next presentation. Sergio, I think you joined us. Yes.
I'm here.
Hi, nice to see you. So I would stop sharing my screen and hand over to you.
Okay. The audio is kind of with an echo. I hope you can hear me well.
We can hear you very, very well.
Okay. So I will share my screen. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Unfortunately, I have not been able to join you since the very beginning because I am attending another project meeting in Berlin. So can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Yep. Okay, so let's go for it. Perfect. So my name is Sergio Fernandez. I work for EMT Madrid. EMT Madrid is the public transport operator of the city. And we are also the coordinators of LEAD project. The company is a public transport operator. As I said, we are managing the bus service, but we do operate as well parking facilities across the city. And that's the reason why we are also involved and interested in logistics, because those facilities can become part of the logistic chain, either by becoming consolidation centers or cross-docking stations, etc. And of course, if we help making logistics more sustainable, that also helps the traffic flow and therefore the run of our bus service. So in terms of context, in Madrid is the biggest city of the country, 3.3 million inhabitants, is the second most populous functional urban area in Europe, with a 6.6 million at regional level. I mean, European Union, now that London is out of and the UK out of the European Union, but in terms of Europe as a continent would be the third one. Nevertheless, from the mobility point of view, the good or the most relevant aspect is that it's a very important logistic hub. We belong to 2 TNT corridors, and in a day, in a Labor Day, within the city, there are more than 13.5 million journeys, including all type of journeys. Urban distribution of goods accounts 10% of the rolling stock. That percentage can change, and 20% on average of congestion and 30% of road emissions. So logistics is a really important issue. Without logistics, without urban distribution of goods, nothing works. So that's very relevant, and the city is really working in improving it. According to this CITED, which is the Innovation Center for Logistics and Freight Transport in Madrid, more than 65% of the commercial establishments, their operations are done outside the loading and unloading bays, despite the fact that the number of these loading bays have been increased a lot since 2008. Today, there are 18,227 loading and unloading bays across the city, and there are a lot of daily operations. I mean, around 45,000 daily delivery operations are done in the streets, most of them between 7 and 11 a.m. And then, due to the COVID, something that was already rising, such as e-commerce, has doubled, and that's also a big challenge. So how the city organizes or deals with the urban distribution of goods, we have the Madrid 360 strategy since 2019, and then there are different regulations, the Sustainable Mobility Ordinance in September 2021, and the very recent new Sustainable Mobility Plan approved in July 2022. The city is also working in an additional strategy for urban distributions of goods, just to kind of better define some of the measures included within the SAMP. And it's clear that we need to work together addressing passengers transport and freight transport. And the type of measures that this new SUMP includes are about decarbonizing it, optimizing it, and technifying it. So this is a brief approach of the SUMP, which includes 10 strategic axes, 32 measures, and 121 actions. The two of them addressing directly urban distribution of goods are the 6 and 7 strategic axes, about stimulating the shift to cleaner fleet and promoting technological change and optimization of urban distribution of goods. If we get into the detail of this last strategic axis, it includes two main measures. These two strategic axes, two main measures that include different actions. So as you can see, the one about optimization and improvement of urban distribution of goods has a double approach, both with increasing the collaboration with the private sector and facilitating the location of logistic centers, either within the city center or between the first and the second ring road, so-called M30 and M40. The idea is trying to have more capillary distribution of goods. Instead of having big trucks or lorries coming directly from the logistic hubs outside the city, directly within the city center, the idea is to make it more capillary by using different transfer centers. And this brings us to LEAD project, because it's directly addressing these priorities. So the idea of LEAD is to use digital twins to enhance and improve urban logistics. The project itself works a lot in co-designing the different value cases, developing the different tools to let the 6 living labs developing their own digital twin. So there is a library which includes a lot of modules that can be picked up and you can tailor your own digital twin based on your priorities. And then by implementing a physical pilot to validate that digital twin. And of course, including the scalability of it. So as you can see, the kind of the most interesting part is that this digital twin is based on, first, understanding your own local context, then validating the strategy through different value cases, and then experimenting by deploying the digital twin, which at the same time fits onto the operations of the different logistic operators involved in each living lab. And therefore, we help them also to optimize their operations. So there are 6 cities: Madrid, The Hague, Lyon, Porto, Budapest, and Oslo. And if we get into or focus on Madrid use case, what we have done is to, there is some phrase which is included there. Our local partners are City Login, Last Mile, ZLC, UPM, which is the Polytechnic University, and Panasonic. And what we have done is to launch a urban consolidation within the city center in Plaza Mayor, so it's really centrally located at one of our parking facilities. And from there, City Login operates on a daily basis with up to 15 clean vehicles, electric vehicles, and they deliver around 2,000 parcels per day. So the idea is that they instead of coming from San Fernando hub, which is 25 kilometers away every day with the different vehicles, they bring vehicles with the lorry, with the cargo to this Plaza Mayor, and from there they transfer, they consolidate, they transfer, and they use these 3-wheelers, those 3-wheelers you can see in the picture, fully electric, to make kind of the capillary distribution. And they provide the data. It's in operation since October 6th last year. And this is just a brief idea on how the digital twin workflow is. So the data sources are either different geospatial information about the low emission zone, the Distrito Centro. We have also information provided by the operator, so the vehicle characteristics, personnel, traffic speed history, the daily services. Then the first step is to make a rough cut distribution planning, either choosing different scenarios, so delivering from the outskirts or delivering from the city center, and we get a preliminary emission calculation. And from there, we have like a first idea on which are the environmental and operational KPIs. And based on this, the user choice, that means the operator can either choose, okay, let's optimize the routes, depending on which is the choice I have taken. And we get the final emission calculation, noise calculation, and route plan, the optimized one. So all this data is used by the operator, CityLogin, to really optimize their operations. And the data is also available for researchers, other stakeholders. You can find them in this GitHub link. We have already published them for further innovation and exploitation. And these are some figures of the results. So according to the first scenarios comparison, the truth is that we are reducing the number of kilometers driven by 33%, and also the driving time by 12%, which is really quite a good point. It is true that in terms of walking time, CityLogin, the operator, is taking more time, due basically because they have increased the number of personnel attending the Urban Consolidation Center, but so far it compensates very well by the fact that they are reducing driving time and kilometers driven. The impact on employment is also clear. 12 new jobs have been created, to start with the Urban Consolidation Center. I will not go through the detail, but you can also take a look afterwards. And the company is really happy because they are even thinking of duplicating and replicating, per se, the solution in cooperation with the City Council. So the first outcomes, well, about the advantages of using the digital twin is that the first step, so this preliminary planning, it's really fast. So it answers very easily some what if questions. What if I use another vehicle? Or what if I deliver from this other location? And it is very adaptable to the vehicle type or the different restriction conditions of a specific low emission zone. I forgot to change the acronym. That's the acronym in Spanish, ZBE. And the second step can be executed without any sophisticated software. So, and the project provides guidance for connection, and with all the models covered is the vehicle emission calculation model we are using. And there is this library publicly available where you can see all these modules. But of course, there are areas of improvement, and I'm getting just to the end, because so far we only include the central low emission zone of the city. The urban consolidation really does not feed all last mile flows. For instance, we are thinking how this could be scaled to food, for instance, food delivery. It only responds to e-commerce packaging so far, so parcels. And then, as I mentioned, to study HoReCa channel, we need to adapt the models. And of course, as it happens everywhere and always, the quality of the solutions you get by applying a digital twin depends a lot on the availability and quality and detail of the data you feed it with. So Madrid Living Lab has been awarded, selected as the best practice on sustainable logistics by the EIT Urban Mobility. So we are very happy about this. And that's all from my side. So any questions, I would be glad to answer if I know the answer, of course. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sergio. Any question for any of the speakers? As I let you digest and think about them, I can start with the first question for Sergio. I understand correctly that the software that you have developed through LEED, it will be available and usable by other cities.
Yeah, it's I mean, let's say the project itself, all the technical partners have developed different modules. Some of them have some sort of copyright, others don't. But all of these modules are published in a library. We can afterwards facilitate the link, so you can take a look, and you can just let's say play with them. Of course, you need probably some technical background in order to make all the connections between the different models. But yes, there is a public library, so the idea is to share the resources.
That's great. Thanks a lot. Any questions for any of the other speakers from our audience?
Maybe I could answer the question that was asked by Subina.
Yes, on the challenges.
For the challenges in the Antwerp project. Well, of course, one of the major challenges is the alignment. How can you align 13 companies to move in the same direction, to standardize in the same direction? That's not easy. And some of these companies are real corporate companies. I mean, with also international base. Well, what we do is every month we sit together in the cult operations meeting with all companies around the table. And believe me, these are a lot of supply chain expertise that we have together. And by doing so, the companies learn to know each other. And if we then try to synchronize, let's say, the arrival of the goods at the consolidation center, the company realizes why he should do that. And by doing so, they create a gain for themselves, but also for the others. So, and this, let's say, creates a kind of more or less relaxing environment to discuss some topics together. And this is very important. And I think this kind of collaborations and open collaborations were never tested before or very seldomly, but this really works. Huh? If companies realize if they have to relax a bit with their constraints, that would be the benefit for the entire group, including the livability of the city. And that's very important. You have a clear view on what it helps, where it helps, and where it contributes to.
I have two questions for you, Alex. One is how long was the process to set up this, let's say, this consortium of partners working together? And the second is what was the role of the city of Antwerp in this process?
Yeah. In September 2020, the city of Antwerp launched a call for innovative projects in the city. And they offered a grant to a consortium of companies, organizations that were able to define an innovative project. So we entered a file for that, and we were selected as being one of these. And then it took us 1 year to build up this framework. Together with, we found 7 pioneers companies to build together with us this framework. And after 1 year, let's say the cooperation was there, right, and was signed. Next step was then to go to an RFP to select a service provider. Selection of the service providers and preparing for operation took us approximately 10 months, right? And now we are in the next phase in the sense that we are already since March, this means 6 months, we have started the operations, and now we continue to onboarding and looking for, with this blueprint, looking for other cities to roll out. But it took us, let's say, to build the cooperation, took us 1 year, so to say.
That's great. Thank you very much for your answer. Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat. Then I had prepared. Oh, Sergio, please.
Yeah, I just would like to mention that I focused the lead project on the Madrid Living Lab, but I encourage you to take a look on the website and see what other living labs are doing, because every one of them are exploring different measures and approaches, either by crowd shipping, exploring even autonomous vehicle services. So it's really, there is a wide variety of use cases.
I think if the models are indeed also developed to do a digital twin with an autonomous vehicle, that would be extremely interesting to use the data that has been produced in another living lab with that more, let's say, futuristic approach, and see what that result could have, what could be the result of applying that technology in a different context. I think that's the avant-garde in terms of what we can do with data and technology. I just had one question with we can maybe wrap up the discussion with. So I would ask this to each one of you. So what would be your advice for cities that are just approaching now the theme of sustainable urban logistics, that have not had a lot of expertise on it in the past years, and they are approaching this subject for the first time? Where to start? That would be the question.
If you want, I can start.
Yes, please.
For me, it is, let's say, building a kind of framework in which the city distribution should operate. And this framework contains some collaborative engagements that can be started, some regulations. So it's important that there should be a governance. I think the governance is a start of everything. And then you can try to fill in how you see possible collaborations or not, or you just leave it like that. But at least you need to have a governance, in my view.
Yeah, if I may add, I fully agree with what Alex said, because when regulating directly without having the proper cooperation with the different stakeholders involved, that most of the times is a failure. I mean, you just get the kind of the opposite reaction that you are intending to through the regulation. So I think building the trust between the different stakeholders many times is just kind of a minor detail, but it influences a lot. So contacting, it's impossible to contact all the freight operators or the people who is directly involved in freight. Many times that it happens in many places, but for at least in Madrid, many of them are self-employed, so it's really difficult. But contacting the associations, the different sector associations, inviting them for kind of even informal chats, and just presenting them which are your plans or which are their thoughts, and exchanging information is a very good first step. And then, if possible, trying to launch some sort of maybe minor demonstrators or pilots in cooperation with the private sector to showcase the usefulness of these new approaches and the measures that you would like to scale up at a city level in a very specific area, for instance, of the city, or with a very specific chain of shops or commercial street. That also generates a lot of visibility.
Yep,
Thank you,
I can only support what Alex and Sergio have said. I was thinking along the same lines, really. My advice would be, first one, do look at what's available at the guides, for example, that Ivo posted. So there's a lot available in terms of studies and guides that you could build on first thing. Second thing is try and build a community of the players you want to get involved, like on a regular basis, which is similar to what Alex said. Again, it's important to have those kind of personal meetings. Has been difficult through the COVID period. But this would be my experience. Once people meet and come together and openly share, that's a matter of trust between players, especially if they happen to be competitors in the market. Third thing would be think big, start small, if you like, which is, I guess, is something along the lines that Sergio suggested. So if you have an idea for a pilot, try the pilot without thinking that you have to have the full plane ready to take off, but rather you can start small and still think big and develop a solve along the way. And then finally, my advice, or that's at least my experience, do exchange actively with players in other communities. I yet have to encounter a person from another city who has flat out refused to assist or help or exchange ideas. Everyone, certainly, seriously, everyone I've talked to, exchanging ideas or asking what mistakes should we try and avoid has been pretty open and cooperative, where it's a give and pay between the communities involved. So at one point you share your own experiences and failures and successes, and you do get something in return. So that's always a good idea. So this kind of webinar would be just a format to do that.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Karsten. And thanks everyone for your advices. So I think with this we can probably wrap up this second webinar of the Coalition of the Willing. As Meline showed you at the beginning, the next webinar will focus on active mobility, and it will take place on the 25th of November. So you can keep an eye on our social media, on the Covenant of Mayors website, and we will make sure also to follow up this webinar with the recording and with all the PowerPoint presentations that our great speakers showed us today. So I think with that we can wrap up for today. Once again, thank you also to Ivo and Yanin that had to leave us earlier, but looking forward to see you at the next webinar if that would be of interest for you.
Thank you.
Have a nice afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.